It did not keep gender records. I think it was a mistake, but they did not keep gender records.
But so you would have joined in '89.
I think we were chartered in '88.
And then when you say like the Carbondale Rotary Club specifically, or that particular branch of the
The
Rotary
the
Club?
the Carbondale Rotary Club was 100 years old, so
Okay.
it was chartered in 1921. That club sponsored our club, and so we're a freestanding club. But that's how Rotary clubs start. They have to have a sponsor by another club, and so we were sponsored by the Rotary Club of Carbondale. We chose the name Rotary Club of Carbondale Breakfast, and because we knew we wanted to be have an alternative meeting as to the noon time. That was the kind of the whole point,
Mm-hmm.
because they had they meet on Wednesday noons. So we thought not. It was exciting to be in from the beginning, and there were a number of people that were involved from the Noon Club. But Sidney Matthews, who died last year, I believe, had been a long-time Rotarian, um, took us under his wing, and he met with us every Tuesday morning. We started out at Shoney's,
That's
which was a perfect place because we had a room by ourselves, and you could go independently and get breakfast.
mm-hmm.
Rotary clubs traditionally, at least in the United States, have been somewhat expensive to belong to,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the ways they fundraise is that the meeting is always built around a meal,
Mm-hmm.
and then the meals are catered, are provided by the venue, one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone has an unexcused absence, then they forfeit that money for that meal. So actually, the more people miss, the more money the club made. So we decided that we wanted to be an affordable club, and we still are a very affordable club.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and our dues are, I think, we just had to raise them because of national dues, but I think our dues are $55 a quarter. Um, and then there's no other. We encourage people to donate to the Rotary Foundation and other things. Um, but we're a hands-on club. They
Mm-hmm.
kind of informally refer to clubs as checkbook clubs, or hands-on clubs, and we are a hands-on club. Um, Not that we don't have people that are generous donors, but um, that's how we raise our funds. We recently had a Good Luck for Good Sam fundraiser,
Mm-hmm.
where we took we we went to every which dollar store, Dollar Tree
Mm-hmm.
in the area. In fact, we took a trip north, and I even went to three in Champaign, and we bought green hats like a leprechaun might wear, like a little felt bowler hat,
Uh-huh.
and we filled those with some goodies from Bake Me Happy, and we had coffee from Jen's Joe. We tried to hit local people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, and tied them up with a pretty bow and whatever, and then delivered them to people. Made orders to have them delivered in a reasonable area, and then we delivered them to people for St. Patrick's Day. It was nice. People could give a gift and donate at the same time. And we actually we raised probably twice what we thought we were able to donate $750 to Good Sam.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
and
great.
that's not a huge amount of money, but it'll buy him something.
Well, I mean, and that's the key to any of this kind of nonprofit activity, right? Every dollar counts, right? There's $750 is not to be discounted in its value to Good Sam, and like what that provides for how many people over the course of a week or a month or what have you. I mean, that's if you were to just say at $5 a meal, how many meals that provides. I'm not going to do math on camera like
No,
that.
neither, right? Neither would I. True. So that's the kind of a thing, and we were, very challenged over the pandemic quarantines, obviously, but and I'm not sure if I've gotten off track from where we wanted to
No,
be or
you're
not.
great.
But our
You're great.
fundraiser, our major fundraiser has been, although we weren't able to have it last year, is the Great Carbondale Pumpkin Race.
Mm-hmm.
And then the city chose to bring back Carbondale Halloween, which was so exciting. And I just hope that the momentum isn't totally lost with that too. But with the pumpkin race, the city allows us to close down the Mill Street underpass block, and people actually put two axles through a real pumpkin, and put then however many wheels on that they want to put on, and you let go of your pumpkin at the top of the hill, and you race other pumpkins to the bottom. And I don't know if you've seen one or not, but the people are extremely clever as far as it comes to their, the way they decorate their pumpkins, and people wear and children wear costumes because it's Halloween for one, but because the CCA, Carbondale Community Arts, in the past has sponsored a costume contest. And so that encourages kids to dress up. So it's just, we were trying to have a really wholesome, fun, family-oriented Halloween activity.
I don't know how I landed it, because a couple years ago, whichever one that was like a soaking wet, rainy.
That was we've had all kind. That was 2 years ago, and we had beautiful weather, I think, the year before, and we had so much wind. I thought Megan Cole from Main Street has been instrumental in helping organize, which is what she does, but she does it so well. And I thought Megan was going to blow away. I mean, it was pretty brutal, but hey, the show must go on.
Well,
and if
that
there wasn't
rainy-
lightning, so
sorry.
we had it anyway.
The rainy one. I remember, because I don't know how I got caught up in catching pumpkins at the bottom.
Oh, good.
That day, but I had been out with the kids, and we were all poorly dressed for the weather that was there. I was in my typical shorts and t-shirt regalia, and I don't
gosh.
think they had coats and whatever else, or decided to, he was there and was able to provide us with some coats and whatever else, and we just hung out at the bottom of the run and were catching pumpkins for that day. So that's a memory that's kind of stuck in my.
Well, that's very important, because the pumpkins that win their heat, then if they're allowed to smash into even hay bales or whatever, it could damage them.
Yep.
So that's a very important responsibility. The most fun part, I could talk forever on everything, but I could talk forever on the pumpkin race. We have had the most fun with the pumpkin race, and the thing that I think makes it real interesting and so much fun is that we actually quietly encourage cheater pumpkins. And a cheater pumpkin is a pumpkin that might be on a platform that where the axles do not go through the pumpkin itself, that it's just sitting on something. Or it could be a squash painted, or a watermelon painted, or something that's not a pumpkin. And people have been, or the other thing is casters. You cannot have a caster type wheel. It has to be a wheel that the axle goes through the center. So those are our cheater pumpkins. And we encourage cheater pumpkins because in the past, and I'm so hoping that we'll have that this time she'll be an Olympic champion. We've had Deanna Price wield our Mallet o' Justice. And
Mallet o' Justice.
Randy Osborne, you may know, is one of our members. He took a piece of an oak tree and made a mallet out of it. And it's very heavy, and she wields it so well, and if she wields it just right, She's sort of like Gallagher, and it goes everywhere. That's a reference that probably 4 people will get.
Oh no, I think Gallagher is a timeless skit that plenty of people still know. I think you're good on that one. I think you're good on that one. I'm gonna
Anyway,
jump in with the break in real quick because timeless is what we're looking for with the podcast, right? WTF Carbondale, where we interview interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back together to this little old place we call home. And somebody that has called this little old place Carbondale home for many years now is Marcia Sinnott for episode 57 of the podcast. And thank you, Marcia, for taking the time and for working through some of the lighter apprehensions to the brand. I do appreciate that because this is important, right? I mean, you're somebody who has been so active in so many things for so long in this town and have the stories that I'm hoping we can tell to folks that, not just talking about the Carbondale that has been, but really how the Carbondale that has been translates to the Carbondale that's now and future moving forward. And, when I reached out to Sarah, she made a post to the group about something having to do with Rotary. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I thought, oh, good opportunity. I'll ask Sarah if she's got any suggestions for guests that are Rotary tied.
Mm-hmm.
And you drew the short straw on this one.
And you're referring to Sarah Kronline, who is our president this year. She's outgoing. She has done, I want to say, a remarkable job. Who knows how to do things when you're quarantined? You can't see any people. And I think probably across the country people have stepped up. But our club has actually grown in membership, which is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're a stronger club at this end of the pandemic than we were coming into it. And Sarah gets a lot of credit for just hanging in there.
That's good. I mean, and it's been like that for so many organizations and Carbondale. I mean, you're in here now, kind of seeing what we've done with this space to be able to stay relevant. Because if we had not produced anything out of the varsity, it would have struggled to start back up whenever things got regular. So how do you stay in front of people? Same idea with keeping the Rotary Club going through digital meets and keeping people engaged, because it's not necessarily about are you doing exactly what you were doing before the pandemic, but are you doing something that is relevant to your organization's mission? Are there things? What are some of the things that you've done where you've still been able to meet the mission during the pandemic? I know you were just out picking up trash this morning, which is a good socially distanced activity.
Right, it is. Actually, we do have an obligation, or that's probably the wrong word, but to keep Carbondale beautiful, where we have we pick up trash and whatever on Main Street. We have to do it a minimum of once a month, and that's about what we do. Mm-hmm. And we pick up trash from Wall Street to the tracks. And we include the parks, Veterans Park, which is beautifully landscaped right now, if anybody cares to go see it. It looks very nice right now.
Greenridge Landscaping has been out there doing a lot of, Greenridge Landscaping has been out there doing a lot of work in the past week. I've seen them as I drive by to work.
It's beautifully mulched. I'm a fan of mulch. It covers a multitude of sins. So. Like big tops.
Oh, that's funny.
And so we've been able to do that all year long. I mean, the weather interferes once in a while, but with a mask and being outside, we have kept up with that. And then we couldn't have. We actually did our beautiful Southern Ride this year, which is not a race but a bike ride through. We have 3 distances. One's the middle one is actually very challenging because it takes you out to the wine country. Mm-hmm. So we were able to hold that. I think we probably pretty well broke even on that, but because we didn't have that many participants. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to keep that momentum going. And then I'm trying to think we weren't able to, the pumpkin race, we are able to donate someplace between 5 and 7 or 8,000 a year from that net. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge loss to try to make up. And we did have what do we call it? Dinners for dictionaries, because one of the things that we do, and I was pleased but just really shocked that this is still so popular. We provide children special dictionaries for paperback, fairly small dictionaries to all the third graders in our area. Uh, and I thought, this is kind of stupid, really, because what kid, I mean, they don't even care about books.
Third graders like, dictionary, let me learn all the words today.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's not, it's not electronic. But I have to tell you that I've been several times when we've presented them. The kids are thrilled with them. Some kids, I think it's the first book they've had that was their own book. They put we have a plate in the front of it, a place where it says that Rotary donated it, but they can write their names. And then we show them, kind of how to look up words, and there's sign language, and so they're doing a little sign language. They're thrilled with them. And in fact, Sarah Kronline said that whose kids, one's graduated from college and one's maybe in the middle of college, they still have their dictionaries.
Yeah.
So who knows?
It's important. I mean, I've got my kids are all 10 and 11 right now. They're my biological son and my step kids, and they're all very well tied to this idea of a physical copy of something, because it's almost like a treat, right, to have a physical copy of something in a world where everything else is a screen. So while you may think, oh well, this is this keeping up with the times? Is there a different way that we could deliver to it? It's like, really, there's something special about that. In some instances, when I refer to art, the presence of the hand, but in this case, the physical copy of something, I think really means something to the kids. I think you guys are onto something.
It does. Well, we had we thought that if we had a dinner, actually, William Lowe is a very special person, and I went to him and said, who would be good at furnishing, packaged meals, and who donates to, what does, help me with this, the Cristados helps with.
The Southern Illinois Collaborative Kitchen.
Exactly.
Yep.
Thank you. With the collaborative kitchen, and he mentioned a couple, and we had the best response from St. Nicholas Brewhouse in DeCoin. And so we thought, well, maybe some people from Carbondale area don't actually make that trip, particularly during the pandemic and whatever. That might be a real special meal. So we had St. Nicholas furnish the meals. We did most everything by you had to, by social media. And we were able to raise more than enough money to buy the dictionaries. Now, it turns out that because school wasn't meeting in person, that what we are choosing to do this is we held on to the dictionaries, and then in the next school year, we'll present dictionaries to third and fourth graders. So I think that'll work real well. We felt like we didn't want to just like leave them in a box at a school. We want to go in and present them to them, and make a little bit of a deal to it. And that way, because all the kids weren't attending in person, so hopefully, by fall they will be.
Ceremony, really, that's where young folks like this derive importance from, is when you present them with, it's not just here's an item, it's here's all of the circumstance around the item and why it's important, and now they've got a memory to go along with the physical item, and they, like you said, carry it around with them until they graduate college and understand just how important this little pocket dictionary was.
Apparently, it was. I was pleased. It's actually a national Rotary project. So we just kind of latched on. One of our members thought it was a real important project, and we've done it for a number of years. One loses track.
Is there anything that really sticks out in your mind over the years with the Breakfast Rotary that like has been the longer standing activity, or some of the more successful things that you just go, wow, I really like this? I know you were talking about the pumpkin race, but that's been about 7
We've been on that 7 years,
okay.
Right. The best thing about Rotary, as far as I'm concerned, over all the years, is just the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the people have become, just closest friends
Mm-hmm.
that I would never have met. And I don't know if any of your viewers are probably younger people, but Blanche Sloan was one who was just a consummate Rotarian. I would have never met. I don't think our paths would have ever crossed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the relationships and the bigger view. I think the thing that I was most impressed with, and one reason I joined was because Rotary International had just launched right before we became a club uh, what they call Polio Plus,
Mm-hmm.
and their goal was to eradicate polio worldwide. Well, even Nigeria became polio free. They have to be polio free, I think, 3 years in succession. And I think there's just a couple of nations in the Middle East, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. There's just 2 countries maybe in the whole world
Yeah.
that have polio now.
And
I mean
oh,
that
sorry.
that's pretty impressive.
Well, and I was gonna say, the what bit of time I've spent kind of guesting at some Rotary activity, that really it's down to the very select country. I mean, we're talking very rural Afghanistan, where there's limited information on why vaccines are safe for use and why this is okay. And I remember one meeting, just the discussion being about how the cost to achieve the vaccinations goes up exponentially as you have fewer and fewer people
I
to
think
reach
that's
and
true.
vaccinate.
I hadn't
So
thought about that. I'm sure that's true. I mean, look at the. I don't want to get into controversial territory, but look at the issues with people in our own country
yeah,
about a vaccine, let alone people who are, are totally, they live in tribes.
yeah.
Um, why would they, you know?
Trust somebody
I
coming
find
in
it,
with a UN aid package or
yeah,
something like that, because it's in that environment, that a UN care package or a vaccinator comes in, that is a foreign entity to their
sure
society
it is.
as it sits, and there is no trust between them and these organizations. And it's like, well, it takes time to garner notoriety in these very small societal circles that exist in very difficult to
True.
access places. So no, it's a very reasonable thing for
I
folks to
think,
understand.
right. But it's just amazing that they actually have accomplished it. Because I grew up, I can remember being quarantined because of polio back in um, it was probably in the late 40s, maybe in the early 50s, and literally sitting on the curbing on one side of the street, and my neighbor kids sitting on the other side of the street,
Mm-hmm.
and we just called back and forth. Movie theaters were closed. People didn't wear masks. I don't remember any masking, but we just everything, everything just shut down. And then iron lungs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I certainly people have seen pictures of people gasping for breath in these horrible these these
Yeah.
horrible big iron lungs, and then kids that were out of school for a while and then came home back to school and they limped, or it was just it was extremely scary. And to know that that's no longer an issue many places.
And it's really globally. I mean, it's all but there. I didn't realize that the polio initiative with Rotary was so young. I thought it was nearly as old as the Carbondale Rotary Club itself, in terms of
Yeah.
how long the entire global Rotary activity had been focused on polio. But it's only been about 30 years then.
Right. And
That's
I tell you, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has they have a dollar for dollar match, I think, for dollars that Rotary raises. That's probably it's been more recent, but it's certainly, when you can double your money.
yeah, yeah, off of the back of somebody who's got it.
Exactly.
Well, that's I think that's a good place to kind of make the transition from from the Rotary conversation to the Marcia conversation. We'll intertwine some. Whoa, not the Marcia whoa now. But how did you and Jim, were you already together when you guys came to?
Yes, we've been together forever.
What brought you guys to Carbondale?
Well, what brings everybody to Carbondale? SIU.
Was it school or was it work at the time?
No, it was we came down here for school. To be real honest, the admissions were actually they did not have any. SIU at the time, and I hope I can remember the name of the program. Jim was an unclassified student. As a young father and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
he hadn't kept his grades where they needed to be, and so SIU offered an opportunity for him to come to school, and they had what I think was a wonderful program that if you had taken a class and hadn't done well in it, you could take it until you could take it 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got an A that last time you took it, that's what stood on your transcript.
Huh.
And it seems to me that, if somebody's willing to pay tuition to
Mm-hmm.
take a class 10 times and finally masters the subject,
Mm-hmm.
I don't find problem with that.
Which class did he take 10 times that he had
Well,
to
he
know?
He didn't have to take any 10 times, but he retook classes he'd had at another college. Is what he actually did. Poor guy. He's not even here to defend himself.
Maybe a couple episodes from now we'll have him on. He can come in with
Oh,
the
and
sword
to
and shield
refute
and say,
it. Exactly. But anyway, that's exactly why we came. And I can tell you, when we came in town to find an apartment, had a baby at the time, and I can remember sitting in what was the Hub Cafe, which is now Thai Taste.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was not landscaped over across the street. It was just kind of dismal.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember, being very young and not having a lot of experiences away from home, that I thought I'd come to the end of the world. It just seemed like so far away from home,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the winter time, and it was not. It was interesting. And then all the streets, even back then, seemed to be one way, and
Mm-hmm.
we were all, had a terrible time finding our way around. And I'll tell you too, there were only 2 stop lights in town.
Wow.
All the rest of them were stop signs. Phone numbers, you had a central, and you had to ring central, and then maybe I'm not right. But they just had, I think that's right. But they just had like 3 or 4 numbers in your phone number. We didn't have a phone because we couldn't. Can you believe that? I bet the young people today cannot imagine life
What would
without
I
a
do
phone.
if I couldn't?
We did not own a phone. We had to go to the neighbors or go to they had pay phones. You
Yeah.
put your money in, check the slot to make sure nobody else had let money in it, because that was found money. But we did not have a telephone, so I think I'm remembering right. And most people had party lines, which was a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother, was a whole nother thing. But and apartments that would have been 19. We came in the winter. It was quarters at the time. I love the quarter system,
Mm-hmm.
but we came in the winter time, and there was nothing to find here. We actually lived in Heron for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and actually rented from Itchy Jones' grandparents,
Huh.
although we didn't know it at the time.
It's a small world.
It
in
is
Southern
a
Illinois.
small world. It is a small world. So we came to go to school and did that.
And then was it kind of an immediate turn into business for your family? Because
Not really. We when I think Jim graduated in '63. We had our second son in '62.
mm-hmm.
And had then he graduated in '63, and because we were from Champaign and that was home, and
Mm-hmm.
his family's there and my family's there, we packed up, and as we're packing up our little meager belongings, in an apartment on Mill Street, where it was still brick and two lanes wide, we kind of looked at each other and said, "Why are we leaving?" Because Champaign is a great place, but at least we felt like it took a lot more money to live in Champaign. Down here, we had 2 boys. I mean, you had look at the outdoors.
Yeah.
You know, there was so much down here for us. Jim is an avid hunter and fisherman, so so we went back and lived in Champaign until '67. And I'm going to need a drink.
Yeah, please take your time. Take your time.
Excuse me.
It's a lot of talking.
Well, and it's a pandemic.
That's it. Your vocals are.
Jim can only listen to so much.
And like I said, this is what I love about a guest like yourself, Marcia. You were like, "Oh, well, I'm going to talk a lot," and I was like, "That's perfect. That's because you guide yourself in and through these stories. You start to remember things as you go along, and
it's terrible.
start to talk through the whole thing, and then we find these interesting points along the way that are just things that people need to know about." So, sorry, 67.
No, that's fine. So in '67, he found a position as the manager of the SIU credit union. Now, at that time, the credit union had been moved out of the living room of a Dr. McDaniel, who was one of the primary movers in the credit union. And I honestly don't remember what department he was in, but his wife was a weaver. I can remember that, Clarabelle. But so it was in a little building on the corner of Whitney and another street over. Not there anymore. Just south of the New Baptist Foundation place, sort of in that neighborhood, maybe to the west of it a bit. And it was in an old house, and it had less than $1 million in assets. And back then, the banking industry was able to keep credit unions down, and they could not have checking. So he stayed with that until he had the opportunity to buy the corner of Grand and Wall. And that was a Shell station at the time, and he ran that. And that was the same time that I decided to quit school teaching and go into real estate, which of course then interest rates immediately went to 18%. And that's a whole nother story. And I will tell you something you might actually appreciate, and that is that I was president of the Carbondale Education Association, which is the District 95 teachers, the only time they ever struck.
Really?
So yes, I was a spokesperson. We walked a picket line. I learned a lot of life lessons. They had a school board meeting. One of my fondest, scariest moments was they had a school board meeting, and lots of parents were there, and most of the teachers were there. They're supposed to be there. And my role was to stand up and make a statement to the school board, walk out, and the teachers would walk out behind me. And they did.
They did.
But I didn't know they were, one never knows. So it was a wonderful learning experience, I have to say.
Yeah.
There's a man named Don Strom who was on the radio at the time that some old timers will remember, then became our police chief and was a mentor to people like Jeff Grubbs and Chief Reno.
Yeah.
So that all happened. But Jim Jim went with the Shell station, and at one point I think he found that, if I remember right, he found that he had a repair shop, and it was getting to the point where just a shade tree mechanic couldn't cut it anymore without lots of expensive equipment.
Yeah.
So he became Quick Trip and was a convenience store for a long, long time. Lots of people fact, our younger son met his wife because of Quick Trip.
had the right customer at the right time.
Well, she was, people would come in the morning and get their coffee and whatever, and she did. And anyway, now they've been married 35 years. So.
It's amazing how those little chance encounters happen.
Exactly.
I tell you what, the 18% interest rate on a home thing just rattles me to think of, what it would take to buy a home.
I know.
In this instance,
I know, really. And people complain about 5% now.
Mm-hmm.
We did dances when it came down to 12, and then it got to 10, and then the single digits, and it's like, oh yes. It was amazing. It was. I was glad that it happened at the beginning of my career, because we learned to sink or swim. I left a position where I was guaranteed, a paycheck and whatever, although it was very hard work. That's a whole nother story. But and then I took a 100% commission job. I mean, I don't know if people understand what that's like, but if you don't sell, you don't eat.
Yeah.
Luckily, I would never have done it had I been a single mom, or had I, because we did have Jim's salary at the credit union. But no.
I mean, especially in real estate, it's one of those things where, it's you probably don't make money once you first get into it, because you have to build up a network.
Exactly.
People have to want to give you their home to sell, and want to come to you to help them find a home.
But I really loved it, and I still have my license. I still partner with Kimberly Hall, but I'm not active in it. And I use Rotary, and I still try to be active in the Chamber of Commerce to try to keep. I really enjoy meeting new people, and that's real important to me. This pandemic is just. It's just been so nice to get out. I went to South Dakota last weekend with to watch football, and oh my gosh, I feel like I've been reborn. I have to say, I didn't realize. I knew I missed it, but I didn't realize how much.
Well, and I've been very lucky, right? For me, there are two aspects of the social aspect, but also the performance aspect. As a comedian and an MC and somebody who spends the time on stage, it just hasn't happened. So to be able to do these concerts and do these podcasts and other things, I'll tell you more about what William Lowe and I have cooking up after we're off the podcast, because I don't want to let that one seep out too soon. But also he's episode, I think, 18 of the podcast. So
I will definitely go back.
I'm gonna go through and pull all of these that I know you're gonna like, now that we've kind of talked and figured out some. I've known William since. I would have been 15, 16, and he would have been just a little bit older than me. And
really?
I ended up working for them for 4 years and on and off through college.
Oh, in the old location?
Oh, the old location, absolutely. There was for a short amount of time, there was a place called Duckett's, where the printing plant is now. It was an arcade place.
Vaguely.
Video games and what have you. And that's how he and I first kind of linked up, and we would always eat at New Kahala and what have you. And then... yeah, and now it's funny, we look back on it, we're all in our mid-30s now. Mike Arthur, the shorter gentleman who would work the counter at New Kahala and was one of Will's classmates, we're now all kind of interconnected and trying to figure out our own businesses and, what our things are up next. Will and I have a food truck that we own together that we're trying to sell because we never got it off the ground. There's just there's so many things out there that until you talk about them, you don't know where these connections are. And that kind of leads me into my next question for you, as to who are some of the more interesting characters that you've met through your time just living and networking in Carbondale that just are standout folks in your mind?
Something I should have told you is that I don't think very well on my feet.
That's okay.
And so my mind is so blank now. I've met a lot of interesting people through and made a lot of actually long-term friendships, actually more through faculty than anything, and through Jerry Kill is probably Coach Kill is probably the most outstanding and the person and the most memorable of all the people that I've met.
Yeah.
He was such just who he is, just such an honest, straightforward, um, values relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Just has his head on so straight.
Mm-hmm.
Family first. Um, and just uh, you know, our whole family thinks he walks on water. So,
Well, I mean, and
so
I
he'd
would
probably be
say
number one.
that town wide. I mean, because where do you know where he's at now? I don't.
He's at TCU, and he's helping with football there. And I think that I don't know. I'm not close to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Rebecca still is at Lake of Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Uh,
just to leave a lasting impact on a place like Coach Kill has, especially with something that still bears his name, with the Coach Kill Cancer Fund.
exactly,
And that to be
exactly.
a constantly revolving set of activity around something very personal to him, and in turn personal to the entire campus and the region. And when you start tying it into things like SIH, now becoming a Siteman Cancer Institute affiliate or organization. I don't know how they would describe it. Eventually, I'm trying to get Woody on the podcast, but I think I've got kind of the similar barriers to some folks as I did here, wanting to solicit your participation on the podcast. I got to get people to understand kind of what this is a little bit better, and I think that's coming through well. But to have that staying power is impressive.
It
It's just very
is.
impressive.
It's very impressive. And I'm trying to think back to the, to olden days. Back in the day, actually, Delight Morris was president when we came,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw him. And he would interact. He and his wife would walk evenings on campus,
Mm-hmm.
and he would interact with the students. At the time, but it's not somebody I knew, and I met or whatever. Coach Kill, I felt like we knew, and whatever else. And there's been other coaches and people, as much through athletics. A dynamic person that I think that is still on campus and active now is Matt McCarroll
Mm-hmm.
with the they make beer and they make wine.
Oh, the
and
fermentation sciences.
fermentation.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
No, and
I
I was
know.
thinking, I was like, Matt McCarroll, who is Matt? I was like, that sounds so
Yeah,
familiar.
yeah.
And then
I met them, he and his wife, when they first came, and he's done so much with that. And what I like, I think, is that it's collaborative. I
Mhm.
love that idea of things, everybody not being in their own little bailiwick and just
Mhm.
concentrating on whatever, but things that are working together, because that's kind of what society does.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, not everybody's into the cannabis activity that's legal now and all of
Yeah.
that fun stuff. But my neighbor is Buck Hales.
Yes, he too.
So Buck's doing all that, but there's so much more activity around it. We've got cultivation centers both to the north and the south of town. We've got actual retail activity in here. I know that the city has continually looked at, well, how can we create a public event around cannabis, and it's just interesting to see how there's this handshake between kind of the university and the community on, this is something that we connect with. This is something that is the future, even though it may not have been as welcome years prior. But also you look at it and you go, oh, 1970s in Carbondale, I'm sure there was plenty of this stuff floating around then too.
I had babies at the time, so I can remember the 70s. I want to remember, I was just trying to, racing in my mind, thinking of people that deserve mentioning. There's a woman that worked for many, many, many years at SIU that I think was at the time very underappreciated, and that's Charlotte West, Dr. West. I don't know if you're familiar with her or not.
Not offhand,
But Charlotte West came to SIU. She was a huge Title IX advocate.
Mm-hmm.
and was hated by football coaches, by many of the men coaches, because they felt like she was taking away from the men's sports. She came here when she came here. I think people today don't realize, and I don't think I realized at the time even, of how I mean, you look at the basketball playoffs now, when the women have a weight to lift and the men have a full weight room, and in the inequities, hopefully everybody's heard about the women's meals were wrapped in cellophane and the men had these big spreads. I mean, that was just 2 months ago.
Yeah, very very real, very real.
When Charlotte came to Illinois, basketball, girls in the high schools, girls basketball was for recreation, and if girls played in a competition against another school, let's say if the Carbondale girls had played a game against the Murfreesboro girls, then their boys' teams were not able to play in the boys' tournament. They were penalized.
Wait, say that one more time. If the girls
participated in a competition other than for fun, then the boys' teams were penalized.
That's
what
depth of
Charlotte had
sexism
said.
that our generation doesn't quite understand.
I understand that, and that's they may not understand Title IX and whatever else, but that's how inequitable it was.
You know what I enjoy, what I'm seeing on the back end of this conversation, Marcia, is the what challenge to a system has looked like over years. I think two things that you've touched on, both was it Dr. West or just
she is Dr. West. She still lives in Carbondale. She's talk about competitive. she still plays golf. She goes to Florida in the winters for quite a bit of the winters. But no, she still lives in Carbondale, and if you can talk her in, she stopped giving presentations and whatever. But if you can talk her into a podcast, she will curl your hair.
I think that's one of the moves. My thought had been, because really, and this is kind of the social networking aspect of the podcast, of getting the right person on within one group of folks and then expanding into that group of folks from there. And I had thought, well, I've got a good relationship with Diane Doherty or Doherty. I can.
Yeah.
I'm awful with names. My pronunciation of names doesn't matter what they look like.
Well, Diane and Charlotte West was one of Diane's mentors.
Perfect.
So you need to know about Dr. West. Dr. West was actually inducted into the WNBA Hall of Fame in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Wow.
A granddaughter who's now is a graduate now of with her master's degree from SIU, but who has played basketball seriously for years, and actually had a full ride scholarship for basketball through college. But she was probably a junior in high school at the time, and she and I made the trip to Knoxville to attend the induction ceremony of Dr. West. Pat Summitt happened to be there. If that's a name that in women's sports that should ring a bell, from Tennessee. It was probably her last public appearance. But anyway, so she is a big deal. She's in the I think the MVC Hall of Fame. She's in a lot, but around SIU, at least in the past, and particularly when she was active, she was vilified.
Yeah. Well, and this is right. This is part of because we see now, decades later, what the result is of people standing up to an unjust system years ago. And I think that your work with the CEA is another one of those things that is indicative of what progress looks like decades down the road, because somebody stood up at one point and said, no, there's something that's not right about this. Here's what we're going to do to change it. Right. And that is something that is just, town-wide. There are so many people that have that feeling in all generations at all points in times. And what what I kind of see in Carbondale is that this is almost kind of that laboratory of activity, that this is almost kind of that practice pad for being able to challenge something that isn't right, not just here in this region, but around the country, right? Because I mean, just talking about the Rotary stuff, that, you know, when you talk about being one of the first women in a club, that was because of a Supreme Court ruling.
Exactly.
You had
The
said.
Supreme Court had to had to find that, because it was basically a private club, that I'm not even sure what it was, but whatever it was, I think Rotary's glad now.
No, absolutely. You can't. You
Well,
can't just go ahead. Sorry.
SIU was also one. Bill Norwood is a black man who was was a quarterback of the SIU football team back in the day when many colleges didn't allow blacks. SIU was, and I'm not sure who's around that could talk on that subject.
I had Pepper Holder on for a 2-hour podcast at one point, and
Okay,
I told
I'm
him
sure
that I have to revisit with
know.
him because he's a stash of knowledge.
And how about Milton McDaniel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Karina Milton, I've got to get them.
Oh, you've got to get them.
Oh yeah,
on.
absolutely. That's a for sure.
Oh. Zanetta was one of my 5th graders. Oh, what wonderful memories. Wonderful, wonderful people.
And it's so funny to see kind of just how these things all connect at some point, you know, because I go back and I look at this being a generational resident of Carbondale. So my and this is probably where you and Jim may or may not know some of these folks, right? So I'm related to all the Bushes. So Dean Bush is
really,
yeah. So Mackie is my great aunt Mackie. Her sister Donna is my great grandma Bush. Lived in the one room house right across from Carbondale New School.
Okay.
And then her daughter Donna is my grandma, and Clyde Hunt my grandpa, and trickles on down through my current living family and so on and so forth. That my mother would be the same age as your younger son, born in '62. You know, and I don't have a relationship with my family now, but I have, you know, this carnal connection to this place just by virtue of having so much, you know, lived generational experience in here. So it's just interesting to see how it all connects down the line, because I'm sure that there was plenty of crossover between Jim being right there on the corner of Grand and Wall, and all of our trailer parks. I say our, they're not my trailer parks, but all the trailer parks being, you know, over off Pleasant Hill and Warren Road and what have you, that have the Bush name on them. So
right. We happen to be good friends with them, but but I want to say one more thing. Milton McDaniel worked in a restaurant where he couldn't eat.
I feel like he's talked to me about that just a little bit in passing when we've talked about other things. But that's just unreal, right? And what we've come so far from in this town, but where we still have so much to go in terms of race relations and the issue of segregation, and how you know, that still plays into existence today. But like, these are important stories to tell. It's these aren't things to be afraid to talk about. Just like the space that we're sitting in here. You know, when I did the city council person, very good. I'll talk enough to give you the time to drink water. That'll work. You know, when I was doing city council interviews, you know, Ginger Rice Sanders, now councilwoman, Ginger Rice Sanders, as of May 11th, when that comes through, you know, it was at first an uncomfortable space for her to be in, because she remembers this very specific space as a segregated space, as a place where you know, black people felt lesser because they were forced into this spot if they wanted to watch a movie and participate in entertainment. And we can't just let an understanding of these spaces and these issues just fade away, because then what happens 50 years from now when there are new issues that are just rooted in the past from 50 years ago now, and we have to know where we came from to know where we're going to go and how to fix the problems that rise in the future. Yeah, I have a real just having grown up in Carbondale and been exposed to some of the less favorable components of, you know, of race relations in Carbondale specifically, is this microcosm of race relations in America. You know, I feel very passionate about it, I guess I should say. So yeah, thank you for kind of teeing up that idea, because Milton and Corrine have so much
Great
experience
people.
and such a story to tell about it. Absolutely. How did you and Milton first meet? Do you remember what?
I was Zanetta's 5th grade teacher.
Okay.
And we met that way. And then Corrine was a member of Rotary Club at one point, and then she got involved enough in other things that that she didn't come anymore. But we used to do a project, and Milton would be our Santa Claus,
Mm-hmm.
and he is the best Santa Claus you have ever seen.
Yeah.
Of course, has a perfect disposition for it. But and they've just always been extremely good to me, and warm and inviting, and when people are kind towards you, then it kind of, you just feel it back.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's it's. No, I'm just glad that folks are still here, right? Because they're the other side of it is, so many people with so many talents and gifts and minds could have just picked up and gone somewhere else. It's very easy to leave from Carbondale, but it's also very difficult to leave from Carbondale, right? As you were talking about with, we packed our stuff and we went off, but then we were like, we got to come back. There's just a magnetism to this place.
There really is. There really is. I mean, the beauty of the area, and just the we used to say it's not totally true, but it is in a lot of ways. Even back when my kids were in school, we didn't really have to visit the world. The world came here. And there's not a kind of a person really that our kids didn't have to learn to, live with, adjust to, be friends with, or whatever. Whether it came to, racial diversity, cultural diversity, kids from all over practically all over the world were in school with them, and so it was just a great place to raise kids. It really has been.
No, I love. So you just said something that a phrase that I've used for some time, and I always say, there's no way that I'm the first person to say this, and I've got to find the origins of this idea. But to say that we didn't have to go to the world came to us.
Yeah.
And that's just so true of this place. And people may say, oh well, there are college towns all over the country where there's a broad swath of folks from all walks of life and all over the world. But it's different in Carbondale because of the closeness of everything.
That might be true. I hadn't thought about that.
And I don't, that how kind of tying this back into real estate and the development of the town kind of plays into that any one place in town is so physically accessible just by virtue of a 20-minute walk or a 5-minute car ride. Has that kind of always been the case and the feeling of town, that it's always been very easy to get around and from one place to the other, or is that more of a recent phenomenon?
Well, I can tell you, I can remember when we were first in town, and it would have been about when our younger son was born. My husband went all the way out to Arnold's Market to buy peaches. And I love our local peaches. And it was a shed at the time. It wasn't the store that it had been, or it wasn't until recently. So for some reason, and we had a friend that lived out near the corner of Pleasant Hill and 51, and it seemed like that was a long way away. So it's interesting how we've lived south of town. We live south of Arnold's Market, and we've lived out there since 71, and that doesn't seem very far at all anymore, because the town has grown out so much. So when we came, the houses that are on what we call behind Murdale.
Yep.
That was all new. And when we came, not Lewis.
Lincoln, Thomas.
No. I'm not thinking of schools. I'm thinking of. This is really funny. I'm sorry. The street that goes in front of the rec center.
Grand.
I did Grand. I just
Grand.
blank. I mean Jim's Stores. I mean
It
the,
happens. You're right.
because Nukahala
Uh-huh.
rents. That's how I've developed more of a relationship with William, or feel like I know him, is
Yeah.
because, they moved just a few years ago to the space that my husband rents and owns and rents out. But Grand Street stopped at Pinch.
Really?
It wasn't open, and there was it really relieved traffic. Once it opened on up,
Mm-hmm.
it really relieved traffic on out. But no, for whatever reason, it stopped right there.
Huh.
So there wasn't Lewis Park. There was Park Street, and all the mobile home parks.
Mm-hmm. Would Park still not Wall, but Lewis, was there still a go around, like you could drive up Park Street and kind of at the crux of the hill you could take a left and get back to kind of that little part of
That
town?
has to be true, but I don't remember that being true.
Okay. It's interesting
Because
there,
I had
right?
a son that our older son went to Lewis School.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm sure they've got old maps of the city, but I do know that Lewis was not complete there, right past. That was a really good donut shop where Pinch is. I can't remember the name of it.
I think about this in terms of kind of what, just what I remember, having traversed as a kid growing up in the past 30 years and just kind of how that plays out. Because I'm sure Tommy Gleason would have owned a bunch of that space. And I grew up, so one of Tommy's daughters lived on Neil Lane, and I think it would have been possibly his mother's house before it was his daughter's house, and she lived just up the street from my Aunt Dorothy, and my parents were able to build their house because Aunt Dorothy sold them 5 acres for $1 in 1990 or whatever it would have been. And it's just all these things connect, and there's just such a story there. And now Becky, one of Tommy's daughters, is just really we're well connected, and she tries to help me get some folks on the podcast and some connected people. It's like, because there really is all of these stories just so interwoven with one another, and until you talk about them, not everybody kind of knows them or sees them.
Well, Roxanne Roxanne Conley, they started Arnold's Market.
Uh-huh.
So there's a tie back into that.
Well, in his trailer park, because I don't remember if Tommy had named Roxanne for Roxanne, his daughter, or if he had named Roxanne for
the trailer park.
Yeah.
Oh, I certainly hope he named the trailer park after his daughter.
I can't remember which direction it went, but at some point in time there was Tommy's work on that one in a connection. But I just and now I look at it now, and somebody like Curtis, who is Roxanne's son, grew up playing baseball with my cousin Justin, and spent a lot of time around the house that I live in now that my grandpa built in '64, and I mean, it all just seems to come full circle.
It does.
It really does. And that's it. It's full circle on the podcast, episode 57.
Good.
With Marcia Sinnott. And as we say at the end of these, have a good one, whatever that one may be.